Welcome, Rishabh. Good morning to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you and to everyone who's watching and logging in today. Thank you for having me, Iris. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and of course working with you.
Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you for joining and for playing with this series of Masters of Flow. So welcome, everybody. This is Masters of Flow Summer Talks, and this has been a series of about 2 weeks of live conversations between a community of flowers. I've coined the name flowers to all of us because we've been deep into learning and training and practicing the art and the science of flow as a very particular way of looking at peak performance from a really flowy perspective. And it's been quite a journey, and we've had the pleasure to collaborate together and work together several times. So I'm very happy that you are here, Rishabh, and we can have this conversation now live and share it with the rest of our community because we're
Great.
all very
Thank you.
fascinated by the topic. And I think it's a good time for the rest of the world to learn a little bit more about flow. So why don't we
Absolutely.
get started with a quick introduction? We can introduce ourselves for the people who don't know us. Rishabh, can you just say a few words about your background and how you got into this flow world space?
No, absolutely. Of course, my name is Rishabh Sharma. I'm executive coach, PCC certified and from the ICF. I've been coaching since 2008, which seems it's almost 17 years, which is quite a while. And of course, I'm based in North Vancouver, Canada, in British Columbia. And I've been coaching, I've worked with leaders, I work with people who are transitioning in their careers. And of course, I bring in to my work, you know, coaching, of course, but also neuroscience, flow, um, and also energy work to help them, unlock their full potential. So, yeah, my work is very, it's very aligned to my who I am, to help people cross the river of challenges that they encounter. So yeah, I love what I do, and I don't think I'll be doing anything else.
That's amazing. And you also come from the corporate world before you got into coaching, right?
Yes, I was a banker for 10 years. Now I became a banker because my dad said, become a banker and a good Indian son. That's what I did. And it took me 10 years to realize that, what, banking isn't for me. But I was very lucky. I started my career off in Zurich, Switzerland. Then I was in New York, then in London, and then in Dubai. And of course, I've lived in Barcelona, in Turin, Italy. Yeah, I know it's been fun, I have to say.
Quite a journey, Rishabh.
Quite a journey.
Yeah. And my journey has been fairly similar. I've also been in the corporate world for over 20 years. I worked as a corporate communications executive, and at some point, I completely burned out. And the last 6 years has been the new phase of my life, the new unfolding. And coaching just seemed to be the natural next wave of my creation and my way of expressing everything that I've learned and everything that didn't work for me and everything that I realize now is a better way to work and to live and to create that well-being and that balance between work performance and life. And I mentioned this way because for me there's been a big piece where I always thought work as separate from my life. So you work, you make a living, and then you live. And somehow this always created a big rapture. And I think that is a big part of what led to my burnout and what leads to the burnout of so many corporate executives. So the journey and what coaching has helped me learn about myself and also help my clients is integrating. And the flow performance neuroscience was the next piece of the puzzle to really bring well-being into performance and not see performance as something that you sacrifice your life for, but rather finding myself in a space where I can learn how to work in a different way where work can be fulfilling, I can achieve things, and I can also have sustainable well-being as a wholesome human being, rather than getting things, wonderful things done, getting trophies, making money, being successful, but then not having a life, not feeling good in my body, disconnecting and burning out. So that's how I got into the flow space. Flow just seemed to be this magic part, the magic potion, the missing piece to bringing performance and the things I wanted to achieve in my life in a wholesome way.
Absolutely beautiful, Iris. And what you're saying is you started working to live as opposed to living to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Great.
And I believe it's a journey of many, many coaches that they come from an experience that somehow didn't work for them at some point. And then in the journey of learning how to overcome that challenge, it becomes natural for us to share the knowledge, share the better ways to live, share the growth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the good things about coaches is, so I learned something, I learned one thing from Marshall Goldsmith, another very, famous coach. And he said that, great coaches are great because they have great clients. So, and I really believe that. I think, the beauty of being a coach is, of course, I think for me personally, I've made so many mistakes in my life that I can really I've had a chance to reflect on them. and and coaching is not about offering advice or giving
Mhm.
tips, etc., but it's about really understanding what a person is going through, to develop that empathy
Mhm.
for an
Mhm.
individual of what they're going through in their lives.
Yes, and especially being a guide and being a mirror to helping them navigate, not without knowing what's best for them, but really just being a mirror and a guide for them to bring out whatever is best for them, because that's ultimately what sticks, right? When you have
Absolutely.
when somebody gives you the answers, then you'll just get get things done for a day, but for a lifetime is when you find your own answers. And that's one of the things that I do love about coaching. It's true. And I'm really
Absolutely.
excited that today we're going to talk about group flow and flowing in teams. Quite an interesting topic for many executives, many leaders, very, very present, I would say, necessity in today's corporate world. And you have over 17 years experience in coaching in general. You've worked with leaders, with executives. So just curious, what stands out to you when you think of team flow and today's world and all the executives and leaders that you work with?
Absolutely. And I'm going to put on my industrial organizational psychology hat for a second. So if you take a step back, right? Why are organizations focusing on teams being more effective? What do they do? Team training, because they want them to work more effectively and ultimately give good results or great results. And so that's the whole context, right? It's about how do you create a high performing team that allows an organization, a business, a division to really achieve, create that synergy within their operating environment. So for me, I look at it from a bit of a, so I mean, I'm from India, and of course, the background is, of course, all of that spirituality, the philosophy, etc. So one of the key things, for any success to happen in life, it was mentioned in our Vedas, the Upanishads, etc., is the ability to have concentration. So concentration again, which ties into flow. When we concentrate on what we want to do for a period of time, that's essentially flow. Then, of course, is consistency, which is doing that concentration repeatedly again and again, which is again your habits, right? It's what habits are you creating that align with who you are. So, are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? Are you an evening person? When do you have that ability for your brain to switch on? So right now, for example, Iris, this is my flow time in the morning. So I'm giving up my flow time for you. But yeah, so how do you first
Mhm.
concentration? consistency. And of course, the third element of what they talk about in our Upanishads is uh, cooperation. Cooperation essentially being how do we get along with other people? How do we cooperate? Because I mean, we know that there's no I in team. We know that it involves a team effort, right? So team flow is actually a really, really important component for achieving anything. So that's the context that I look at it from. Now, of course, coming in from, again, like I told you, I'm going to put on my IO psychology hat. And so what I've seen is in high performing teams, they have to have very clear shared objectives, clear goals, a leader who is supportive, not perhaps so authoritarian, but who listens, who understands, and who sets essentially everyone up for success, which is important. So again, as from a coaching lens, it's about bringing in so looking at 𝗥𝗶𝘀𝗵𝗯 model, right, which is forming, what is it? I just thinking of it. It's called, so he talks about forming, storming, uh, norming, performing, and adjourning. So these are the different stages of group formation. And how do we go through those different stages? How do we onboard people at different stages of the group evolution? And how do we eventually, when people leave, how do we replace them or move forward or evolve as a group? So yeah, people do it well. A lot of organizations have high performing teams. The US SEAL team, the Marines, they're a high performing team. They've achieved those group flow things that we talk about. So, it is possible, and it just depends on how do we set up that structure that allows people to get into the flow. Now, an important part, of course, all of this, which again I believe in, is that to have role clarity. Everyone has to have clarity as to exactly what their role in the team is. What is their job description, right? And a lot of organizations that I've worked with, some people don't even have a job description, and which is surprising. And sometimes the job descriptions were written 20 years ago, and the person performing the job, I mean, I remember looking at job descriptions many years ago. The person must be a proficient user in Microsoft Word. I mean, now, I mean, we've gone so far beyond that, but the job descriptions haven't changed. So, so what I've seen is that, the job description has to evolve, has to be updated actually every 6 months. And the other important part of the job description, from where it starts, in my view, is that how do you evaluate performance? If we don't know what that person is doing, how do you evaluate them? Right? So a lot of managers actually struggle with that because they don't have a clear job description. There's a lot of fluffy stuff going on. It's about perception. It's about biases that kick in. And then of course the final thing is that from a mental health and well-being perspective, which you mentioned was important for you, having clarity in your role is the number one or easiest intervention to support a person's emotional and mental well-being. So so that's I think the fundamental. So role clarity, each person on the team knowing what they have to do. I think that's the starting point.
Yeah, that's a very key point. And as you're talking, I'm thinking of my experience in the corporate world, working with teams, running campaigns and organizing big level projects, how to start from an idea to expand to executing a project that's a year-long strategy. And some of the big challenges definitely came around role clarity. But I do have a question. When we define the role clarity and we write out the job descriptions, and then the job in itself, the project in itself evolves. So there's always been this bit of a challenge for leaders to write up job descriptions. And I think there's some resistance there to the fear that if I define your role and anything comes up that's beyond that, that somehow you're not responsible for that. So then there's been one of two extremes. Either they write up a huge job description, which is just a headache, or it's too synthesized, it's too short, and then it goes beyond that. So what would you say to a job description or roles that do have clarity, right? We know I was the director of marketing, I had a team, each person knew what their main platform of their job was. But then once you are running a project, once you're creating things, then everything kind of starts to intertwine. And so I found in the corporate world, there's a lot of ping ponging. People do tend to throw the responsibilities around to other people. And so what is your experience, or what would you say to that level? What level of role clarity does it need to be? And is it possible to have so much clarity on a person's role when you yourself are starting a new project, or you're a startup company, for example?
Absolutely. And what you said is very relevant. So, we have things, we have things that we do as part of our job description, but there
Mm-hmm.
are things that are on the side of the desk, which we're doing
Mm-hmm.
also, right? Which are not included in the job description. So a good manager, and again, it comes down to the manager. A good manager, I believe, will say, hey, what are you doing on the side of your desk? And if it could be a one-off thing, then it doesn't matter. But if something is important and it's ongoing, bring that into the job description. Is it a special project, or is it something that you're doing continuously, right? So because tomorrow, if you leave that role and someone replaces you, they need to pick up from what you left.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in a normal situation, unless the project's finished or the team is evolved or there's been restructuring, whatever that looks like. So, so it all starts with the manager, right? Does the manager have that vision, that leadership, that sort of awareness that, hey, you know what? So, I mean, we live in an age today where, we have AI. It's not that hard to create a job description. It can be done in seconds. It's about, are you doing it? Are you taking the time to include and update that job description, to include different projects, and ultimately, are you reviewing performance against those tasks?
Mm-hmm.
And of
Yeah.
course, and I think a good manager also, instead of micromanaging, sets clear outcomes that they want to achieve. So, hey,
Mm-hmm.
I want you to achieve this by so and so time. And if they need any help, and again, coming, a manager, I think a good manager is more coach-like and asking questions, right? As opposed to solving problems, which is, hey, so how can I support you? What do you need? What are you thinking? Do you need my help on anything? Do you want to talk about what you're dealing with? These things, really, first of all, create self-efficacy
Mm-hmm.
within the individual. So they are more
Mm-hmm.
confident in their own abilities to do the job. It builds
Mm-hmm.
confidence. It also ensures their career growth and progress. Um, so ultimately, it all starts with the manager of a high performing team on how do they set up their team for flow,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That
Another
that
important
makes
thing,
perfect sense.
and I think, I've worked with some pretty senior executives, and I think one of the things when we brought in neuroscience into it for flow is, so I think flow first starts at the individual level, helping them structure, deep times for deep work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so, for example, for me, like I'm more of a morning person. So after 12 is when I start engaging in meetings. In fact, I schedule a lot of my coaching sessions after 11, because because my deep work is done in the morning, which is for myself. But after that, I find I'm better at engaging with people, interacting, and being more doing my coaching work post 11.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
based on your chronotype, right? Based on
Mm-hmm.
who you are as a person, and blocking off times, and also setting up times as a team when everyone comes together,
Yeah. There
right?
was some very interesting points when the Flow Research Collective had studied team flow and how to create a flow organization, and the idea that you can bring flow into every person in the organization in a way where the company has their flow time. So no meetings, between so just taking your flow, your personal flow time, your personal flow block, and making it a company flow block. So there were companies that would just set their time, no meetings until noon. All meetings are from 3 to 7, for example. And that was quite fascinating to create that level, to amplify basically your personal flow structure to create that into an organization. And while that sounds really exciting, I imagine also there's quite a lot of challenges there now, trying to figure out everybody's chronotype and making everybody flow into now a universal flow block. But there are some fundamental and universal principles of flow that do work for every human being. And as you mentioned, biology, we understand that the 24-hour chronobiology, that's across the board the same, though we change with chronotypes, still that first part of the day is universal flow prime for pretty much every human, because from the moment that you wake, you are in alpha state, and in alpha state, you are in the creative state, you're closest to theta, which is where flow happens, which is where most writers and most creative people create from. So in principle, the first part of the day will be the prime time, flow time for deep work, for solo work, for most people. So that can work across the board.
Absolutely. But some people are night owls, right? So they do their best work at
Mm-hmm.
night. So
Yeah.
how do you compensate for that? So again, it comes down to the manager actually. I think for team flow, of course, role clarity is one thing, but I think also the manager, right? How open-minded they are, how sensitive they are, how much empathy do they bring in to really understand, what are the needs of the people on the team, and how do I meet those needs? Um, if it's again, it's leadership style. If it's like I
Mm-hmm.
said, if it's a dictatorial, authoritarian leadership style,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be hard team flow, but it's possible. It does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in a corporate setting where people have free will, I think the manager really is an important ingredient in all of this.
Yeah. Another big stone, I would say almost equally as important as clarity of roles in group flow, and you touched upon it a bit, is shared goals, clear goals. As you mentioned, a good manager puts clear outcomes. So clear goals, shared goals in a group are uh, are the next big stone. And I would say that even a little bit bigger than that is shared values. And one of the studies that Stephen Kotler had done with his team was understanding that when a company has their values, and they interviewed all of the staff, all of the people of the company on their values. And the people who are not aligned with the company values, doesn't matter how wonderful the values of the company are, how wonderful the company is, how friendly the company is, if a person is not aligned with their values, doesn't have shared values with a company, then they will not perform. He said, ultimately, it's individual. An individual will be part of a team flow, will get into a team flow if the individual's values align with the company's values. So I wanted to touch on these 2 points, which are shared values and shared goals, because goals is a bit more specific, it's a little bit more, more tangible, whereas shared values goes a little bit beyond that. And in the shared
Yeah,
goals, it's actually a flow trigger, and it's one of the criteria of getting into flow. And I do believe
absolutely.
that a big challenge is not having that level of clarity on the common goals of the project.
Absolutely. But I'll tell you one thing about values, what I've seen. Values are important, right? I remember one of the first books I ever read in self-development was called The Value of Values. I still have a copy of it. Um, so the values, what I've seen in organizations, of course, a lot of organizations have great values, honesty, inclusion, work-life balance, etc., etc. But what I've found is that these are the values, yes, but are these values actually, how do they show up? I mean, what are the espoused values within an
Mhm,
organization? And a lot of times these values don't even show up. And frankly, a
mhm,
lot of times people I've seen don't even know what the values are.
mm,
So, yes, in a ideal situation, I mean, there's some organizations out there who charge millions of dollars just to have an organization set up their values and competencies, behaviors, that they want people to espouse. But those are not always espoused. They're always, there's always, and again, it depends on the team, on the division. In some divisions, it may be alive, but in some divisions may
Hmm.
not.
Yeah.
What I've seen is that in sales, sales is a different world altogether. A lot of the corporate values that other people are living by don't actually show up in that division. And again, this is what it is because there's
Yeah.
there's an urgency, right? Closing the deals, getting the
Yeah.
numbers in, getting the sales, because that's what feeds the organization
Hmm.
and sustains them. So yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
Values, shared values, having people with aligned values is
Hmm.
important. How do those values show up? So, for example, if I believe in honesty, if that is my value, then my belief would be I always speak the truth. Or
Yeah.
it could be that I speak the truth when I need to speak the truth,
Hmm.
right? So, how do those bubble up? So, if you look at it, values as the bottom of the iceberg,
Hmm.
the beliefs, are above that, and the behaviors above that, how
Hmm.
they show up in the workspace. So, and that creates culture eventually.
Yeah.
What is this organization like? So yeah, shared values are important, shared goals are important, and then again, the manager, how does the manager ensure that everyone is on the same page, everyone, this transparency of communication,
Hmm.
um, you know, and again, I think it comes from that manager, I think
Hmm.
he or she is the person, or they are the person that are really setting up that fabric, right? I've had some great managers who've been very caring, very kind, very supportive. I've had some managers who couldn't be bothered of what you do, of the level of toxicity in the divisions. So I think it starts with that. It really starts
Hmm.
with that. So team flow,
Yeah.
great. I think it's definitely possible. It happens,
Hmm.
but the key ingredients are role clarity, of course, shared goals, as you said,
Hmm.
shared values, but also the manager or the person leading that team.
Yeah. But just like shared goals and shared values is a big piece of being able to enter into team flow, is also a big piece of the reason for burnout. When we are in a company that we are not aligned with the values, or that, like you said, the
Yes.
values are written but they are not lived, then we start to disconnect. And that is part of the experience of burning out, is you slowly disconnect. And from the common values like honesty or respect, also to the values of what is the company creating, what is the company itself bringing into the world. So for example, if you are a wellness interested person and you're working for a cigarette company or an alcohol company, then that would fundamentally hinder your ability to really be in a team flow, because fundamentally you're not aligned with what you are doing. Whatever projects you are doing, you may get into an individual flow at times, but a fundamental piece of criteria for entering into flow is to be doing something you are passionate about, something that
Yes.
you are intrinsically interested in doing, that is in and of itself enjoyable for you. So for me in my life, this has been one of the big steps that I recognized, that I've been getting into flow in my life, but it's always been when I'm doing something I really love, when I'm having fun, when I'm playing music, when I'm dancing, when I'm playing games. And when we learned all the body of knowledge and science and research in the past century on flow, it's fascinating that yes, fundamentally you have to be doing something that you love, that you're passionate about, and then you can train yourself into all of these other wonderful ways and tools that you can bring flow into your life on a regular basis, and not just when you're doing something you love. And one of the big things is, are you doing something you love? Are you in a company that's creating a product or a service that you fundamentally believe in, and that you are an ambassador of that service or of that product. So for me, it really starts
Absolutely.
there.
So, so you were talking about that, about, someone who's manufacturing, say, cigarettes, right? So actually,
Mhm,
I used to work when I used to work in Switzerland. I had a lot of colleagues who used to work for Philip Morris, and Philip Morris owns Marlboro.
yeah.
And I remember they didn't smoke, but because they would get these free cartons of cigarettes, they all started smoking. So that's a memory that came back to me, totally irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, I mean, in your experience, right? Of course, you've dealt with burnout. You're looking at it from a perspective of flow. You know, how, I mean, see, there are times when, I mean, we procrastinate on the work that we want to do. I know, for example, when I don't want to do something, I schedule it first thing in the morning.
Mhm,
So even though I don't want to do it, but my brain is wired to get it done,
mhm,
right? So that's when I do most of my boring stuff, which I won't even look
mhm,
at after 12. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, how do you go about, when you have that awareness of burnout, you have that
mhm,
awareness of okay, do I
mhm,
really want to do this? How do you find
mm,
that balance of overcoming hurdles or
mm,
doing things that perhaps you don't want to do?
mm. Yeah, that's a good piece. That's a good point. It's been a journey, I have to say, and it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing. My first big burnout was 6 years ago when I was about 39, and I was at the end of my corporate life, and my
Yeah.
and I worked as a freelance with some big institutions on projects. And the big burnout was on all fronts: disconnected, not aligned, not well resourced, no active recovery, not passionate work. So on all fronts of burnout, it was all check, 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 check. Something I didn't understand back then, but I do understand now. So at that level of burnout, it was complete withdrawal for me.
Yeah.
Complete remove yourself from the environment so that you can understand what exactly is going on with you. So that was a journey of self-awareness. That was a journey of becoming knowledgeable and conscious of what is happening with me. What do I want? Who am I? Why have I made the choices that I've made? Why am I living the life that I'm living? And I realized that I thought I was in control and I thought I was leading my life, but in truth, I was very much reactive and very much a slave to a system that I had just become a part of. And I was not riding my car. It was my subconscious doing all of, running the show. So the first leg of coming out of that burnout was full 360-degree, well, 180-degree, steering the ship in the complete opposite direction. And once I did a lot of inner work, a lot of conscious work, and I became aware of who, not that I know who I am, but I became aware more of what I wanted and what made me happy. So I started slowly aligning to that. And then once that inner space kind of freed up, that energy became more and more available for the things that I want to do in my life, because the beginning was really just coming into homeostasis, just creating
Yeah.
a space of peace and starting to slowly be able to dream again without fearing that I'm again going to dream up some other level of burnout. And I think this is a bit of a symptom that I also see in many women in midlife who are powerhouses, powerful women. They are high achievers. They want to do a lot of things. So we do tend to overburn because there's all these things that we want to do. And once we start doing something and we do it full on. And so in the second part of my inner journey and healing journey came all of this new knowledge on peak performance and flow. So how I balance it today is that I don't get into burnout because when you learn how to work in flow, I have designed my life very intentionally in a
Yeah.
way that I can be into flow. My challenge now is trying to get out of flow at the right time because I overflow. Sometimes I'm working 10
Oh,
hours a day. I'm doing the 1 month a day. And I have to push myself to stop at the flow blocks that I know I should, to do my active recovery, to do my boring breaks in order for my flow not to burn me out for the next day. But the way I would
Wow.
balance it today is certainly number one, fundamentally, I have chosen to do something that I love to do. So whenever I have something to do that it's not really exciting, it's boring, and I can feel like I don't want to do it, first I remind myself, why am I doing it? Is this important to me? And that I always start with that answer. And then, okay, this is not my favorite part of what I love to do, but it's important to me because it will lead me to this thing that I want. So that'll give me an extra boost. And then, of course, I work with my chronobiology. So I schedule my flow blocks at the times that I'm primed for it. So this would be some of the main, I guess, top things.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
other thing, of course, is that I have my favorite tool, which is processing emotional overwhelm, and that's the EFT tapping that I'm
Yes.
certified in. And that is like one of the tools that is always available when the mind is doing all kinds of tricks, and I don't want to get lost into my thought processes because my mind is, it'll sneak around all kinds of reasons and excuses for whatever. So I try to put that aside and I just tap on it and just say, okay, what do I want right now? I want to do this work. What am I feeling? Feeling like I don't want to do it. Well, how important is it to me? It's very important. Okay, how about we just do it? Yeah, okay, let's do it. And this will clear up a lot of the emotional overwhelm as well.
Absolutely. And this is no, this is I mean this is beautiful. I've done tapping with you, and I know how effective it is. And you're a great tapper and a great coach when you do that. But tell me, I mean, coming back to Team Flow for a second, and you look back, say 10, if you went back 10 years, right? And you know what, and 10 years ago, say you knew what you know now,
Mhm.
all the tools you had in your toolkit, all the knowledge, experience. And this is the question, right? What would you have done differently?
That is a really good question. I think,
And you can think about it, right? And you can obviously, we can always talk about it later, but something to think
yeah,
about.
because I'm thinking there's so many things I would have done different. Even though I have no regrets, I have made peace with everything that I've ever done. And I know that if I went back to every second of my life, I would probably do everything a little bit differently because the more we evolve, the more we understand, the more wisdom we have. So I would do everything differently. But one of the main things that I would do differently is it's more shared risk because I found a big part
Mm.
of my underperformance, quote unquote, or my level of okay, I want to do so much more, but I don't know how to do it, is feeling afraid being part of a corporation that if you're not aligned, if you don't have the same ideas of this part of the team dynamic is shared risks, shared goals,
Yeah.
and not being afraid to come up with new ideas or other ideas or anything that makes us basically hold back when it comes to a project. And I find that one of the big pieces, and I was having a talk with Rory yesterday, and he was pointing out this piece of empathy that in leadership, a big important piece is to have the empathy, which means to understand people, to understand what they're coming from. And I do find that in the corporate world, we have been trained to numb that empathy out. We don't have the time to think what the other people are thinking, what is their decision making process. It just seems not to be part of our job description. If I'm a manager, I'm an executive leader, director, my job is to get the numbers. My job is to bring in the business, to run the campaign. And so I think the leaders, in my experience, and I believe still goes on quite a bit, leaders are still very focused in the business part. And therefore, I find that there's a lot of fear in the collective, in something that holds the team flow quite blocked and quite stuck.
Exactly right. And exactly what you said, I think, a lot depends on the manager, right? How they the sense of security that they bring in, the ability for people to take risks, the psychological safety, the culture that they set, the precedent that they set, and how involved they are. So I totally agree with you. Empathy. So I mean, so one of the definitions of empathy that I love is from Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And he defines, honesty as the quality of connection to yourself,
Hmm.
and empathy as the quality of connection with another person. So
Hmm.
how do you, and the good way that I find for myself is when I'm interacting with people, I focus on, what are they feeling? What do they need? And of course, I try and not make assumptions. I try and ask them, I say, what are you feeling? I mean,
Hmm.
I make an assumption in my mind, but I'll always validate that. I say, what are you feeling, right? What do you need? And I think going from that perspective allows one to actually have empathy. And one of the core, when you have empathy, that's when you can really dive into things like active listening, which are so important for a coach,
Yeah.
to be able to listen to what the person is saying and not saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I see we're almost at
Wonderful.
time.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are wrapping
Eh,
up. Is there anything you would like to leave this conversation with that when you think of team flow, something that is practical and quick and workable?
You know, I think so. I think I would give this analogy actually. So we have 5 fingers. Each finger looks different. And I think that's the metaphor for team coaching, actually, team flow, that to
Mm.
understand that every person on the team is different. They all look different, they have different ways of being. And as a leader of a team, if you can really be aware that everyone is different, everyone shows up differently, but spend the time to really understand the person and set them up for success, give them that role clarity, have the clear outcomes that you're working with, evaluate performance, keep giving feedback when you need to, positive and not so positive. I think you can really create that structure for team flow.
Absolutely. And I would
Yeah.
add to that, from my personal experience, my three big stones are shared passion, shared and clear goals, and shared and clear risks.
Right.
And there's so many other ones. There's like over 20 something flow triggers and group flow triggers. But I would say it starts with that for me for sure.
Absolutely. And I think the most important thing that I would sign off by saying is, stay true to your soul.
Yeah.
Right.
It all starts from there.
Absolutely.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. This has been very insightful
Thank
and
you, Iris.
always wonderful to be in conversation with you, Rishabh. Looking forward
Thank
to
you.
future collaborations together.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tap.
Yeah, keep tapping.
I'm going to tap.
And thank you,
Thank you.
everybody that joined us in this talk, and anybody who's going to watch the replay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
Bye,
much.
Rishabh.
Bye. Bye. Bye.